this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be telling us of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit Phantom of the Auditorium. I had never read Phantom of the Auditorium before picking it up this week, and I thought it ended up being pretty good. It had a couple of fun twists in it, a likable set of characters, and was a nice take on Phantom of the Opera. If you skipped this one too, you might want to check it out. I think a big reason I never read this was the cover. I just think it's one of the less interesting ones out of the original 62, and after reading the book, I still feel that way. The Phantom in the book is described as having a scary blue and green mask, so they could have gone a little bit harder on that. The setting also involves like creepy tunnels underneath a school, so it would have been kind of fun to incorporate that in. The color scheme is great, but overall, I just think this cover is kind of meh. There is no mid-2000s slime border this week, but there is a 2011 version. There was an opportunity to improve on the original, but they didn't take it. This is pretty much boring in the exact same way as the 1994 one, which I think is even worse because often Jacobus was only going after a few pages of description, but the 2011 one had the entire story, so this cover just feels lazy. Phantom of the Auditorium didn't have much merchandise to go with it, but it did have the usual trading cards, another one of these textbook cover wraps. It was also featured in this set of window clings, and of course was on a pog. Phantom of the Auditorium did get something that no other Goosebumps book did, a whole ass musical. So that's right, Goosebumps the musical Phantom of the Auditorium has been running from 2016 until present day and is based off this book. This will be something we look deeper into at a later date, but if you're curious to learn more now, there's an entire CD out there to listen to. Our front take says, he's out to stop the show. For good. Throughout this story, he's kind of making some trouble for our protagonist, but not as much as you might expect. Our back take says, lights, curtain, phantom, which reminds me of lights, camera, action, and I'm assuming that was the intention. Before we get into the summary, let's read the blurb on the back. Brooke's best friend Zeke has been given the lead role in the school play The Phantom. Zeke's totally into it. He loves dressing up in the grotesque Phantom costume and scaring the other members of the cast. Brooke thinks Zeke's getting a little too into it. But then really scary things start happening. A message appears on a piece of scenery, the Phantom strikes. A stage light comes crashing down. Is someone trying to ruin the play? Or is there really a phantom living under the stage? Two of these things didn't happen. Like that never gets written on the scenery, and no stage lights come crashing down. Anyways, let's get into the summary. The book opens with this line: a mysterious phantom haunted our school. No one ever saw him. No one knew where he lived. Not to be pedantic, but if no one ever saw him, I take it as a given that no one would know where he lived. The first page is also kind of like this meme. Hi, I'm Brooke. I bet you're wondering how I got in this mess. Let me start at the beginning. Because Brooke Rogers lets us know right away that she found this mysterious phantom, and it was terrifying. But she's going to save all that for later. First, we have to learn how her best friend Zeke wears Kermit the Frog pajamas, and how their moms met at bowling league. Zeke is described as having this haircut, so I already know he's going to be trouble. Friday after school, Zeke and Brooke are joking back and forth, when Brooke suddenly flips her eyelids inside out to gross out Zeke, which doesn't work because he has nerves of steel. This line also just gave me flashbacks to childhood, where I'm fairly certain I used to do the same thing. Part of me wants to know if I can still do this, but I'm too afraid to try. Brooke and Zeke are big horror movie fans, so they were both excited when they found out that the school play this year was supposed to be Phantom of the Opera and scary. Brooke had completely forgotten the casting list was just released, so she and Zeke raced to find out what parts they got. To Brooke's horror, when she looks at the list, she sees the following note: Brooke Rogers, please report to Mr. Levy's office. You've been suspended from school. Because that's how suspensions work. This ends up being a prank courtesy of Zeke, and then we immediately find out what roles our two heroes are going to play. I admire Brooke's confidence because she declares, you and I, we're the stars. Zeke is the Phantom, which clearly is a starring role, while Brooke is Esmeralda. Brooke is then shown to have no idea who Esmeralda actually is, but she knows it must be important. Even though some girl named Tina Powell is trying to convince Brooke it's really not that important of a role, but Brooke remains proud to be Esmeralda. This book is also giving us a lot of 90s fashion, because Brooke has mentioned her scrunchies, flannel, and denim jacket in the span of like 3 pages. We jump to rehearsals where we meet the theater teacher, Miss Walker, who is very skinny as a pencil. The kids are all excited to get the scripts when Tina tries to kill the vibe by letting them know that the play is cursed. Miss Walker shuts her up so she can tell the scary story herself. Essentially, 72 years ago when the kids wanted to put on a play, they found an old script called The Phantom, which is not the Phantom of the Opera like I had just been assuming up until this moment. Anyways, the night the Phantom was first to be performed, the boy who was playing the Phantom suddenly went missing. They heard a horrible scream, searched the school, but never found him. So the play was never performed because it was considered to be cursed. At the end of this tale, a child in the crowd suddenly shouts, "There he is! There's the Phantom!" in a chapter cliffhanger. The kids all turn around and see. The Phantom's face was twisted in an ugly grin. His bright red hair stood straight up on his head. One eyeball bulged out from its socket. Black stitches covered a deep scar that ran all the way down the side of his face. "Boo!" the Phantom yelled, bursting into the aisle. More screams. I just laughed. Brooke is not impressed because she immediately knows that Zeke, who somehow managed to sneak off during this little 2-paragraph Phantom story and get into full costume. Miss Walker finishes off her story with how all the copies of the script were destroyed 72 years ago, except for one, which was kept in the school vault. I find this concept of a school vault more intriguing than the Phantom story so far, but I guess Miss Walker thinks after 72 years it's time to finally bust out this script. Tina continues to inform everyone that the play is cursed, and that the Phantom will haunt whoever tries to perform it, and that the Phantom has haunted the school for 72 years since. We don't get any specifics on what this haunting actually entails, just that no one has ever seen the Phantom, so I really want to know how this is considered something being haunted. Miss Walker is handing out the scripts when Brooke turns around for a second, then looks back and Miss Walker has suddenly just vanished. The kids all freak out and Brooke rushes up onto the stage to investigate. She ends up finding Miss Walker at the bottom of a trapdoor. She activates a lever and brings Miss Walker back to civilization. It's then revealed that this trapdoor was also built 72 years ago, when the Phantom was first supposed to be performed, and has never been used since. So I'm kind of impressed that this thing is just still functioning. Brooke then gives us an actual summary of the play. The Phantom was a really scary play. It was about a man named Carlo, who owns a very old theater where plays and concerts are performed. Carlo thinks his theater is haunted. It turns out there really is a phantom living in the basement. His face is scarred. He looks like a monster, so he wears a mask. But Carlo's daughter Esmeralda falls in love with the Phantom. She plans to run away with him, but her handsome boyfriend Eric finds out. Eric is in love with Esmeralda. He tracks down the Phantom in his secret home in a dark passage far beneath the theater. They fight and Eric kills the Phantom. This breaks Esmeralda's heart. She runs away, never to be seen again, and the Phantom survives as a ghost. He will haunt the theater forever. Pretty dramatic, huh? After finishing their first read-through, Zeke and Brooke wait for everybody to clear out of the auditorium so they can play around with that trap door, despite Miss Walker warning them that it still needs to be properly inspected. Before they can get to the trap door, Brooke has one of her allergy attacks, and we learn that she's allergic to many things, like dust, pollen, cats, dogs, and even some sweaters. When these sneeze attacks hit her, she can sneeze 13 to 14 times in a row, with her record being 17. My best friend is actually like this too, and it is enjoyable to start counting when she really gets going. Zeke stands on the platform, and Brooke activates the trapdoor and races over so she can get lowered down with Zeke. Neither of these children stop to think about how they're going to activate it to go back up. This time the platform keeps going down, much further than where Miss Walker had been found. When it finally stops, they think they're even deeper than the school's basement, and appear to be in some sort of tunnel, although it's hard to tell since it's so dark. They agree they need some flashlights to properly investigate, and when they want to go back up, they finally realize the obvious from earlier, that they have no idea how to make it take them back up to the stage. They begin shoving each other angrily until Brooke is knocked backwards into some sort of switch that reactivates the platform. It starts to go up without her, but she's able to hop back on. They celebrate a little too soon though, because the platform suddenly stops about 5 feet short of the stage, kind of like how they found Miss Walker. This results in Brooke giving Zeke a boost up so he can reactivate the platform the rest of the way. Brooke waits by herself only when she realizes it's been quite a while, and thinks maybe Zeke is trying to scare her. This pisses her off, so she's thrilled when she thinks he's reappeared to offer her a hand up. Once yanked back up onto the stage, she realizes it wasn't Zeke who pulled her up out of the hole, but the Phantom in a chapter cliffhanger. I swallowed hard. A strange little man stared back at me, an angry scowl on his face. He wore baggy gray pants and a loose-fitting gray sweatshirt, torn at the collar. His thick white hair fell wild, unbrushed over his forehead like a mop. He had a deep purple scar down the side of his face, nearly as long as the scar on Zeke's creature mask. I could see that he was old, but he was tiny, no bigger than a kid. He stood only an inch or two taller than Zeke. As he squinted at me with his strange gray eyes, his face twisted in an ugly frown. He looks like a phantom, the frightening thought flashed in my mind. This ends up just being Emil, the night janitor, but he sounds very phantom-like to me, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the missing boy and the actual phantom in the end. I'm also guessing it's Scooby-Doo rules, where the first strange adult you meet ends up being the monster of the episode. Emil chases the kids home, and that night on the phone, Brooke and Zeke recap how scary their adventure and the janitor were. The next day, Brooke is walking her little brother Jeremy to school, and continues to show us that she's a horror movie fan by name-dropping Poltergeist and Friday the 13th. Once at school, she heads to class, only to find a new boy, who she thinks is kinda cute, in her spot at the table. We then get this weird chapter ending where she tells the boy that he's in her spot, and he responds with, "This is my place." And the chapter ends. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be taking away from this interaction. The new kid then introduces himself as Brian, and they sort out the seating situation, which had me on the edge of my seat. Class gets started and Brooke realizes she forgot her notebook in the locker and races out to get it. Once she reaches her locker, she finds it wide open with a face staring at her in a chapter cliffhanger. This ends up just being Zeke's mask, but there's a note attached to it that says, "Stay away from my home sweet home." Brooke thinks it's a prank, but when she confronts Zeke about it, he seems to have no idea what she's talking about. Brooke just dismisses this as Zeke still trying to trick her. Brooke then takes the new kid Brian to theater practice with her, where he's put on the scenery crew. Brooke is practicing her lines when suddenly the lights go out and a loud shrill animal cry echoes through the auditorium. The kids notice somebody running around on the catwalk above the stage, wearing a blue and green mask with a black cape. The mystery person swings down on a rope while cackling. He activates the trapdoor and then begins to vanish below the stage. Brooke thinks this mystery man is fairly short and could just be Zeke, but then when she looks down into the trapdoor hole, she realizes Zeke would never ride it all the way down to the creepy bottom by himself just for a prank. Miss Walker is like, everybody back to work, I'll deal with Zeke. But when the platform re-emerges, it's empty. Miss Walker is pissed and cancels the rehearsal. She sends the kids home to practice their lines, and while walking by Zeke's house, Brooke sees Zeke hop out of the car with his mom. He was apparently at the dentist and claims to have no idea what Brooke is talking about, although part of her is kind of like, maybe he just scared them then took off to the dentist. We then jump to more rehearsals, and this time Tina causes Brooke all sorts of issues. Brooke thinks Tina is trying to sabotage her so she can stop being the understudy and steal Brooke's role. While on stage, Brooke has forgotten her lines, and when the Phantom re-emerges from his trapdoor, at first, Brooke thinks it's Zeke again, until the Phantom walks up and starts shaking her aggressively by the shoulders, and she notices Zeke is off to the side of the stage trying to get her attention. Brooke screams for help, but they all just assume she's acting. This kinda reminds me of the scariest scene from Interview with a Vampire.
Methinks a mortal doth approach. What have we here?
I don't want to die.
But death we are, and death we've always been.
Someone help me! Please! What have I done?
We all die.
But I'm young.
Death is no respecter of age. It can come any time. So as you suffer.
Oh yes, Monsieur Vampire, take me. I adore you.
To become our bride. No pain. Monstrous.
The Phantom continues to shake her before saying, "Stay away from my home sweet home," and hopping off the stage and out the auditorium doors. This leaves everybody very confused, and Brooke still thinks it's possibly Zeke working with his friend Andy to scare her. We really have quite a few suspects though. It could be Tina trying to scare Brooke away from the play, the new kid Brian, Emil the janitor, or just Zeke. While leaving the school, Zeke realizes he forgot to go ask the office staff if anyone turned in his math book he left in the auditorium the other night. Brian says he's heading home, and when asked where he lives, he vaguely says just south. Brooke and Zeke ask one of the office staff if anyone turned in the missing math book, like maybe the night janitor Emil, and then it's revealed that there is no night janitor named Emil. That night, Tina calls Brooke to see how she's feeling, because this girl really wants Brooke to get sick so she can be in the play. If I was Brooke, I'd be watching my food around Tina. Tina also asks if Brooke is feeling scared from her Phantom encounter, but Brooke has had enough of Tina's bad vibes and just hangs up on her. The next day at school, Brooke and Zeke decide to tell Miss Walker that they think this mystery Emil man is the Phantom, but she ends up just apologizing for scaring them with her story. The kids decide now that the only logical thing to do is to break into the school at night and look for the Phantom themselves. That night, Brooke, Zeke, and Brian sneak into the school through an open classroom window to investigate the auditorium. They don't seem to have a camera or anything, so I don't know how they plan on proving the Phantom's existence. They hear footsteps, and suddenly the theater backdrop Brian and some other kids have been painting is lowered to the stage, only for them to realize it's been graffitied with, "Stay away from my home sweet home." Brian is very upset, and about to be even more upset, because then the auditorium side doors open and reveal Miss Walker, who is pissed. The kids try to explain why they're breaking and entering, and how although it looks like they destroyed the backdrop, it really wasn't them. Surprisingly, after a chapter of this, Miss Walker kinda starts to believe them. She flips on the lights and notices the trail of footprints from the painted backdrop. They follow the trail thinking it will lead to the Phantom, except it ends up leading right to Zeke's locker, which is not a good look for him. This immediately undoes all the convincing they had done with Miss Walker in the previous chapter. They open the locker to confirm, and there's a can of red paint inside. It's announced that Zeke is kicked off the play immediately, and the kids head home defeated. While walking, Brooke runs into Tina and wants to know if she was just at the school, but Tina just smiles and asks how Brooke is feeling. We jump to later in the week. Brooke and Brian are at the final rehearsals for the play. Brooke has learned almost all of her lines, and Brian was able to repair most of the damaged scenery. Brian comments that ever since Zeke has been fired as the Phantom, all the pranks have come to an end. However, he spoke just a little too soon, because as Miss Walker is trying to run through Act 2, she discovers all the pages of her script have been glued together. She is livid, and she chucks the script at the wall and declares the play has been cancelled for everyone, and to go home. We cut to Brooke and Brian hang out at Zeke's house, where he's been grounded for life. This includes no longer having access to a VCR. They're playing with Buster, his Cocker Spaniel, as Brooke updates him on the play situation. It turns out that Miss Walker didn't cancel the play after all, she was just really pissed. It's also worth noting that Buster seems to really hate Brian for some reason. We may have another Ghost Beach situation on our hands here. Eventually Zeke convinces them to try to catch the Phantom again, because he really wants to prove his innocence and get his part back. In the span of 2 pages, we hurry up and get right to the trapdoor and head on down, which I appreciate since we only have about 20 pages left. Brian wants to stand guard and is concerned that the Phantom is a ghost, but they force him to ride on down too. They have flashlights this time, so I'm ready to see what's in this tunnel. At first, they just see an empty chamber from the last time before walking towards the tunnels, but before they can get too far in, they hear the trapdoor working itself back up without them, leaving them all trapped down there. They conclude that they have no choice now but to continue down the tunnel to see if they can find the Phantom, or a way out. They walk for a bit, with Zeke making jokes to try and break the tension. They finally reach a door at the end of the tunnel, and when they open it, they discover a fully furnished room. They notice a bowl of cereal on the table, and Brooke deduces that he must have just left because the cereal isn't even soggy yet. Brooke then has a loud sneezing fit, which results in the Phantom then possibly finding them, because when she's done sneezing, the door slams shut and they're all locked in. This next part is unintentionally hilarious. The kids were all so freaked out that the door shut that they just had assumed they were locked in. They all push on the door only to realize, wait, we just need to turn the handle and pull? How do doors work? They pull the door open and surprise it's Emil in the doorway, looking quite pissed. He wants to know what they're doing in his home sweet home after all of his warnings to stay away. Brooke is like, so you really are the Phantom? And Emil is kind of like, well, I guess I am. Brooke wants to know what really happened 72 years ago, and Emil is confused because he's only 57, so he really doesn't get all this Phantom talk. It turns out Emil lost his apartment 6 months ago, and he just remembered this room from when his father was a janitor, so Emil isn't the Phantom, he's just homeless. They hear the trapdoor moving again and decide to rush past Emil. He just sadly says, you ruined everything, repeatedly, and doesn't pursue them. When they reach the trapdoor platform, they find Zeke's dad, who had gone looking for Zeke, heard the trapdoor moving, and decided to investigate himself. The kids update Zeke's dad on the Emil situation, and he calls the police to report a homeless man living underneath the school. When the police arrive, Emil is already cleared out. There's still 10 pages left though, so we're not done yet. We jump to performance night, and Brooke is backstage feeling nervous but ready to perform. Right before the first act starts, she runs into the Phantom, who Brooke thinks is Zeke. The Phantom doesn't say anything and just takes a bow at her, which for some reason Brooke doesn't find odd at all, even though it's been firmly established that Zeke never shuts up. At the end of the play, the Phantom rises out of the trapdoor in a swirl of dry ice fog, grabs Brooke by the hand. The only issue is Brooke immediately can tell it isn't Zeke. Brooke decides just to roll with it and recites her lines, which results in the Phantom telling what happened to him as a child. 72 years ago on opening night of the play, he fell down the trapdoor to his death, where he became an actual Phantom, and now he reemerges ready to complete his starring role. The Phantom says all this to the audience, and they of course just think it's part of the play. Brooke goes to pull off the Phantom's mask because she thinks he looks kind of familiar and wants to know who it is, except this goes very wrong, and the Phantom immediately covers his face with his cloak and stumbles backwards, and falls into the open trapdoor to his death all over again. The audience goes wild for it, but Brooke is kind of like, oh shit, I just think I killed a guy. The curtains are drawn, and Zeke shows up rubbing the back of his head because somebody knocked his ass out. They decide to ride the platform down to look for the Phantom, but find no trace of him. This all somehow happens during the time that the play is wrapping up, because when they re-emerge, Miss Walker is like, great work, see you at the after party. They look for Brian to update him on the Phantom situation, but he's nowhere to be found. They walk past Brooke's locker, and they see that it's open with a 1920s yearbook placed inside. They open up the marked page where they see the Phantom play being promoted, and since it's the very last page of the book, they look closely and discover that Brian had the starring role, so he was the Phantom's ghost all along. And that's how this one ends. There is a direct episode pairing for Phantom of the Opera, and it's a pretty good adaptation for a 22-minute episode. Our notable actor this week is going to be Stuart Stone, because last week we had Carlos from the Magic School Bus, and this week we have Ralphie. If you were a Canadian child actor in the 90s, you were on Goosebumps or Magic School Bus. It's like Canada's version of Law & Order for New York actors. On to the episode. So I see we're starting out with a dream sequence. She might, though.
She might poison you so she can play the lead.
She'd never do that. Throw me down a flight of stairs? Maybe.
Real.
Terrifying. Or Stockholm Syndrome.
The Phantom kidnaps you.
Then how come I stay in love with him?
Oh, because you're attracted to his mystery.
Brooke is psychic in this one.
Come to eternal darkness.
Poor Corey looks a little sad.
Mrs. Walker.
Not now, Corey. He must have accidentally pressed the switch.
Awesome.
I don't want...
Brooke is pulling a Velma.
My glasses! Zeke, I can't find my glasses!
I like that they just threw a rubber rat at this kid.
We may be down here all night.
There has to be a switch.
Emil looks a lot more spry in this version.
God, It's about time. Ah! Who are you?
Emil. Girl, there are multiple seats available.
Excuse me. You're in my seat.
Tina is thirsty.
Just wish I could have tried out for this one.
You can help me with the scenery. Brian, Tina, Tina, Brian.
This mask leaves a lot to be desired, kind of like the cover.
Stay away from my home sweet home, Esmeralda.
Oh, a mere scare.
Come on, Brooke.
We have stunt work all over this scene.
On the catwalk!
Go away.
I like this guy's line delivery.
Night guy? What night guy?
Emil, the night janitor.
Night janitor? There's no night janitor.
This is reminding me of Barbarian.
Somebody lives here.
These boys were like, bye, Brooke.
You should have listened to me.
Run for it! Run, run! Let go!
I like that they kept in the homeless plot.
We found a hat and this old mask down there, and the officer thinks that he was a homeless man who was living underneath the stage.
Special effects.
So have I.
Not so rough, Zeke.
She just chucked him on down there.
There's the boy who was supposed to play the Phantom in 1923. That's the boy who disappeared.
Overall, I thought Phantom of the Auditorium was a fun read. I definitely found myself actively trying to solve who the Phantom could be, and enjoyed some of the red herring Stein threw in there to muddle things up. Having a homeless man coincidentally be living underneath the school in a tunnel was kind of a ridiculous choice, but I liked it. The reveal of Brian being a ghost is a bit drawn out, to where it didn't really feel like a twist worthy of the last page, but that just comes with the territory when you're an adult reading a book targeted towards kids. I thought Brooke and Zeke were enjoyable main characters who were funny without veering into annoying, so I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5 scrunchies. Okay, on to our totals. Just like last week, Phantom of the Auditorium didn't have any vomit, asshole victims, it's only a dreams, or shoulder scares, but it did bring us back to the 90s. In Getting to You with the 90s, we had 4 90s moments. These included a lot of flannel, denim jackets, multiple scrunchies, and a VCR. This brings our total to 92. I was tempted to add Friday the 13th and Poltergeist to our list, but these are 80 things that I just associate with my own 90s childhood. We had just one It's a Prank Bro in Phantom of the Auditorium. This was when Zeke put up a note saying that Brooke was suspended. This brings our series total to 45 It's a Prank Bros. There could have been a shit ton of pranks, but they ended up being the handiwork of Emil, not Zeke in the end. Phantom of the Auditorium had a total of 14 chapter cliffhangers, and they were pretty solid throughout the book. They do have moments of falling into the patterns of phantom sightings, but that's a given considering what this book is all about. This raises our Goosebumps total to 293. The clunky cliffhanger award for this book goes to chapters 20 to 21, where the kids are trapped in Emil's room, but wait, they just forgot how to operate a door? Push or pull, how does that work? Shocker ending. Our big twist to this story is when Brooke looks into the 1920s yearbook, she sees that Brian was the Phantom all along. This brings our Goosebumps series total to 19. Well, that's it for Phantom of the Auditorium. It was fun getting to read one of the original books that I had skipped over as a kid, and I found it to be pretty enjoyable. Next week we're going to look at Attack of the Mutant, which I know involves comic book villains and bus stops, and I kind of remember enjoying it as a kid. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Phantom of the Auditorium. Did you like this take on Phantom of the Opera? Would you live under a school to avoid rent? And what did you think of my masked horror clips this week? Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
The pride. The love.